You're on 121.5, the emergency frequency.
Welcome to the 21.5 Show, a podcast for professional pilots by professional pilots. Join Dylan and Max, both with experience in flight instruction, the airlines, and business aviation, as they talk to a variety of industry experts, share stories, and have a little fun along the way.
Episode 82 of the 21.5 Show. It's the show for professional pilots by professional pilots. I'm joined by my co-host, Max. Normally when you're on the road, Max, and you're calling in on a remote line, I can see where you're at, like out the window of the Hampton Inn or wherever, but your laptop is broken, so I'm like looking at your chest.
I can only open it so far, otherwise the screen turns off, so it's top on the list to get fixed. Don't fret.
All right, well, I'm going to do my best to read Max's chin language here as we attempt to go through this podcast. Max, it's August, and for me, that means training is coming up. And I know it's for pretty much every professional pilot, something you get to look forward to at least once a year, and for many twice or every 9 months or however your company does it. And as I started to think about training and preparing, we got an email in from a listener asking for some advice. And I figured, let's just jump right in. And I think we have a lot to talk about here, but it has to do with sim partners.
Always a polarizing subject.
I know, exactly. The best of times, worst of times here. It says, I need some flight advice, which of course is brought to you by our friends at Harvey Watt, harveywatt.com, for insurance, loss of medical protection for professional pilots nationwide. Anyways, back to the flight advice. What would you do if your sim partner is not participating in group study? Background: I am at a major airline going through initial training, and my sim partner is not showing up to group study events. These are informal events which we practice our flows, callouts, and procedures. Each time there is an excuse: I'm meeting up with a friend from a long time ago, or I'm just going to study in my room. The list goes on. It has affected my training to the point where I was adopted by a few other sim pairs. I am personally caught up with where I need to be, and the new issue has arisen. When we go to scheduled training events, my sim partner is just competent enough to meet the standards, but it takes a lot of the instructor's time. He has said things like, if we're behind, they'll give us extra sims, giving me the idea that he is counting on the mercy of the training department rather than his preparation. At this point, we have only been working in flight training devices and not the actual full motion sim. Would you ask for a new partner prior to the full motion sims, or drag him along through the training process, possibly allowing it to become a bigger problem later on? Sincerely, Hopeless in Dallas. I love that it's in Dallas because it seems like where everybody goes to train now.
The mecca of aviation training.
So I thought this was a good place to start the show, and then we can kind of talk about some other sim stuff. I don't know. What are your thoughts here for our listener?
Well, it's unfortunate because training is always much more pleasant when you have a good sim partner, whether that's in how capable or experienced they are, or attitude-wise or whatever. And this guy, unfortunately, drew the short straw in the sim partner pairing, which if you do this long enough, you have drawn at least one short straw, maybe a couple. But it's one thing when it's somebody that is really working hard and is just having a hard time. Like some people, this stuff comes easier to than others, and that's unfortunate. This case, obviously, this is an effort situation where the guy is not putting in the effort to be ready to roll when he gets into the FTD, and then it's going to be even worse in the sim. But my advice would be, you want to be a team and everything with your sim partner, but if he's not going to be part of the team, then you need to take care of yourself, which he's figured out how to do. He's found some other people to study with. But at the end of the day, you are responsible in training for yourself. So make sure yourself and you are prepared, and it will work itself out. Because when people start to progress at different rates, they will pull them apart and pair you up with another whatever instructor or whoever they need to pair you up with. And it will kind of sort itself out. So just don't let it get in your head. Keep your head down, do what you're doing, and make sure you're prepared. And here's the other thing that I would do, but I don't know if necessarily everyone would do this, but when it comes time to the sim, when you have a weaker sim partner, for any of the reasons I said before, there's always an opportunity for you to carry and help with that sim partner. And that you can do that for so long. And then at some point you're being helpful. And then there's a point at which then you're just providing a crutch because you're not going to be there or can't do that on the check ride, et cetera. But in this case, if we got in the sim or whatever, and this guy's blowing it, I wouldn't be so eager to help. And I'd just be like, dude, you should show up more often. and let them learn the
Yeah.
hard way. And sometimes, that might snap somebody into back into reality. But I certainly wouldn't be very eager to provide a big crutch so this person can continue to get away with this.
100% agree. I would not probably go to the company and say, I need to switch some partners, or this person isn't studying enough. Like you said, that's going to work itself out.
That's not your job. That's somebody else's job.
But like you said, it's not your job to cover for them and remind them, hey, did you want the gear down right now? And did you want this checklist to be you know what I mean? At the end of the day, that person is not going to be on your check ride. Only you will be in the sim.
Yeah, that's a good point, though. If you haven't been in an airline before, the great part about it is that very little is your problem. And this guy, while he's your sim partner, it's sort of your problem. Managing it, not your problem. You manage you.
Exactly. It actually says it's a major airline.
Yeah. So let nature take its course.
Yeah, exactly. And I know it can be frustrating in the moment. And I think you're doing the right thing by connecting with other people. But you can also use it as a learning experience too. I mean, maybe this person's going to make some mistakes and it's going to be frustrating to you, but I think it'll also make you better because you're going to be watching them make mistakes and you're going to have the luxury of just kind of sitting back and learning. So that's my thought. And look, if you do end up getting extra sim sessions because somebody else is slowing down, who cares? You already got your seniority number.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not a race. But that's a great email. I thought, great perspective. You and I have both had the highs and the lows. I was just reflecting on some of the sim partners I've had. I had this incredible run, ironically, in Dallas in 2008. I went through an initial on the Embraer 145 as a first officer and was paired up with this guy who hadn't even been a flight instructor. This was back in the days when they were hiring like 300 or 400-hour pilots. And he had like flown jumpers and for skydiving operations. And he came to the class, super nice guy, very young, very naive. And for some reason, they paired him with me. I don't know why they did that, but...
Because you're very tolerant.
Yeah, I guess I was very patient, tolerant. I'll never forget when we got paired off for the first time in like a CPT or something, like just a procedure trainer in front of the paper. The instructor we were with started talking about, well, when you're flying, we're going to do this. And when the captain's flying, we're doing this. And my partner stopped him. He's like, what are you talking about? And the guy's like, well, when it's your leg, he goes, I'm not going to fly, am I? He goes, the captain flies, right? I'm just doing the checklist and stuff. And the guy goes, what? He goes, no, you're going to fly every other leg. And that kid was so like blown away. I felt bad for him. He had no idea what he was getting in for.
That's incredible, though.
And he just since that training segment where he was told he was going to be flying the airplane, he just lost it. He was so over his skis. He was never the same. Like we'd get in the sim and I wonder what he thought he was going to be doing in the sim, like just moving the gear up and down.
Yeah.
So when we're like flying in the sim, like he wasn't ready. He was hanging on the back of the airplane, as they say. And I was super patient. And I put a ton of extra time in with him to work with him. He was a new hire. I'd already worked at the airline for 2 years, so it wasn't that hard for me because I knew a lot of the call outs and sort of like how 121 works. This person knew nothing. And so I invested a ton of time in trying to help him. But I think my point is for this other person, if your partner's willing, you will learn the material better if you're helping somebody learn it yourself. So there was that. But eventually, to the point of our story, we were separated because we were just in completely different...
Progressing at different rates.
Exactly. Poor guy. So he did end up making it through, but it just took a lot of extra sim time. One funny final story from that training segment. I was with like the head check airman and his buddy was like my quote unquote captain for the check ride. And it was going really well. And we were moving along really quickly. And we're like up to the single engine ILS on the last approach. It's like, all right, let's bang this out, and you get the engine failure. You kind of know what's coming next. So I had the engine failure. I get vectors to intercept the ILS. I think you had to do a single engine handful in ILS and green needles, right? I think.
Yes, still the case.
Still the case. I'm just like really having a hard time maintaining the glide slope and the localizer. And I'm like, what is going on here? And I just couldn't. It went full scale. I'm like, I can't believe this is happening. Like I'm correcting. I'm all over the place. I'm like, what is happening here? And I finally said, I'm like, well, I guess I'm going around. And the guy in the back goes, what? Oh. And he turns the visuals up. He goes, oh, shoot. I left you on 2 times speed for this approach on my check ride. The clouds come up. He's like, just land it.
Is that on your type ride or just a check ride?
No, I was a first officer, so it wasn't a type ride.
It's the best when things go like that on the checking event. Like there's always
Checking event.
I thought on checkings too, they're not supposed to speed it up and slew it around.
I know. Who knows whether I'm probably going to get somebody fired.
I had one. I was flying the G3 and this was like level C sim, so the visuals aren't great. So it's all at night and stuff. And I remember I'm doing the single engine hand flown ILS too, and I get down and the same thing. It's minimums, and I don't see anything. It's just black, like it's been the whole time. No runway lights or anything. So I'm like, all right, going around. And I'd already done a single engine mist, and I'm like, what is this? Like in my head, I'm like, what is this guy trying to do to me? This is on my type ride, and of course he does the same thing too. His head comes between the seats. Why'd you go around? I'm like, dude, I didn't see the runway. And he's like, what? And I'm doing the procedure and doing the mist, and he gets back there. He goes, oh, the visuals went dead. Let me reboot the visuals and I'll vector you back around and try that again. I'm like, so we're like cross feeding fuel, and the whole thing. But it's always funny. But so I just recently went to training with my friend Christian, who we have on the line today. Because we have it was funny. We were talking about weak sim partners. And it's one thing when you fly with the same person all the time. It's very interesting sim because when you fly with somebody that you work well with and stuff, it makes things just so easy and smooth. And sometimes you get relaxed, maybe a little too relaxed. So, Christian, you there?
I am. Yes. Yes, Max. I'm glad you thought of me as
welcome to the show.
I guess the competent one here.
Yeah, I was referring to myself as the weak sim partner. So
right.
We had this early simulator and Christian's, again, flying the single engine.
Yeah, it was like a single engine ILS or something, hand flown.
Yeah, to a go round.
Correct.
Yeah, hand flown to a single engine mist. And so we're flying down, and it's very early in the morning, very dark, obviously, in the simulator. The cool breeze is upon me. So we fly down. He executes the mist approach, sets thrust. He goes, flaps 15. And then we keep flying. Then it's like, oh, positive rate, gear up. And then I'm like, God, I remember thinking, I'm like, this thing is doggy, man. I can't believe how slow it's
exactly.
Climbing. And we get climbing all the way up.
Get your act together, Christian.
And then what happened?
And then the instructor goes, hey, so what do you guys do after a go-around? I'm like, go-around, set thrust, flaps 15. And he's like, flaps what? I'm like, 15. I'm like, I said that. And I look down, it's still at flaps 35 or full. I'm like, what the Max? I'm like, that's why it's going so slow.
Yeah, I go, oh, sorry about that. Here, let me get that for you. So we put the flaps up and then we do the rest of the sim or whatever. And then Christian, we're walking down the hallway and he said, let's be real, but you fell asleep when I asked you to pull the flaps to 15, right?
I did say that, yes. Well, the thing is, see, you had the first sim session, right? And then we took a break. We went and had early lunch, whatever it was. Jambalaya, right?
Yeah, I think so.
And, that puts you to sleep a little bit. So your eyes were probably closed a little bit.
Yeah, I was definitely asleep when you called for flaps 15. Yeah, I was. I mean,
he was listening for the inner beacon. He was just, his eyes were closed. He was just 100% focused.
So that's an example of a weak sim partner.
Yeah.
It's a learning experience.
It's funny though, but Christian, have you had this experience? We had a listener write in and basically he's paired up with a sim partner that's not putting in the work. I don't know if you've ever been paired up with somebody like that, but did you ever feel like you had to pull somebody through training? Did you kind of let them fail? What was your experience?
On my initial type, my first jet, I had to basically explain to my sim partner initially when we started, basically how a jet engine worked for the most part. And that was interesting. But at the end of the day, I mean, he did actually put in the work. So when we first started flying the sim, he was really, really weak. And it was my first time flying a level D sim as well. But at the same time, he was just kind of really behind things. And it was funny. He was like, what the hell you mean? We have to do flows? So I just thought I just look at the checklist and do what it says. And I was like, oh, buddy, you're in for one. All said and done, passing the check right at the end. It's just a little bit extra work for you,
Did you guys get together outside of training?
Yeah.
Did you get together like on your own?
We did, and that definitely helps a lot. I mean, especially for him too, kind of bouncing off. There were actually a couple of us, myself, and then we had like 3 other groups of pilots working for the same company. So I think that definitely helps, and also helps like if companies put you up in the same hotel or whatnot. So, but definitely you ended up doing well at the end of the day. It's a little bit more challenge, a little bit more work too, if you're the one kind of helping out,
Yeah, exactly. That being said, if you're the one helping out, that forces you to put in the extra time too. So then you end up learning it better yourself, I think. But
definitely.
That's been my experience. Yeah.
All right. Well, Christian, I just wanted to apologize to you publicly for being so weak, and thank you for bearing with me as I continue to learn in my aviation career.
It's the first time Max has ever fallen asleep in an airplane, for sure.
It's all good. Just, it's the good news is it wasn't an actual check ride. So, but no, we had fun.
I love it.
Makes recurrent a little bit more interesting.
The recurrent's always interesting.
That's right. It's like we always say, you got to spice things up in recurrent. I did the same thing. I did a go around in the sim and we didn't stow the thrust reverser, and I flew with the thrust reverser out for 7 or 8 minutes. And the instructor finally paused it and he's like, this leg strength that you're displaying is incredible. I'm really very impressed, but maybe you guys should just stow the reverser. That would really help things.
We have a great selfie too. We'll send to you that Christian took right after the instructor repositioned us, and he screwed something up and the sim fell out of the sky and crashed in red screen. Christian had the wherewithal to snap a quick selfie.
Right. It was simulating what, the explosive decompression, right?
I don't remember what it was, but I just remember it was boom and red screen. And we're like, what? Always fun in training. Well, Christian, thank you for supporting our crew in the sim. You're a good man.
It was my pleasure. It's a great time.
Christian, before we let you go, give a quick plug for our fall scholarships.
Yeah, absolutely. Arizona Business Aviation Association does scholarships and outreach programs for people interested in pursuing careers in business aviation throughout the state of Arizona, universities, colleges, regular people just wanting to maybe get into business aviation as a career, whether that's being a pilot or business side of things, maintenance, so on and so forth. So we opened up our scholarships here in September. We close in November, and we give away 5 or 6 scholarships each year for $3,500 a person. So it's a great way to get into the industry, network, kind of be part of that group of people if you live in Arizona, and get some free money toward flight training, tuition, so on and so forth. So good opportunity to get involved. So
what about middle-aged men seeking a float plane rating?
I think you asked this last time, and
oh, right. I did.
Hey, it's always possible. I just don't know if you get the top list.
I'm not going to give up.
Yeah. You may not be at the top of the list. So. But hey, even if you don't live in Arizona and you're hearing this and you're going, oh, this is a pretty sweet deal. The Business Aviation Association in your state is probably doing something similar because many of the associations give out scholarships. So even if you're not in Arizona, check out your local association. I'll have a link in the show notes to the MBA site that'll show you the different ones. And go get yourself some free money and maybe a seaplane rating. I don't know. We need to find a state where Maxis can qualify.
And you know what? Speaking of seaplane ratings, one of our previous scholarship recipients actually got an internship this past summer up in Alaska. He might be a good person, maybe interview in the future here on the show, but he got his seaplane rating up in Alaska and doing some float plane operations and flying up to glaciers and whatnot. So it's all possible. I don't think he used the money for that because it was part of his internship, but definitely, good opportunity.
He had to build the foundation somewhere. All right, cool. Thanks for all you do for business aviation, Christian. And thank you for putting up with Max in the simulator.
Yeah,
always a pleasure anytime.
And for driving the rental car.
Hey, it was a cool rental car, right?
And for doing most of the flight planning and the hotel reservations, all that stuff. Thank you, Christian. You're a good man.
Of course. All righty, guys.
See ya.
Later,
Talk
man.
to you later.
We'd love to hear from our listeners. So shoot us an email, info@215podcast.com. If you've got maybe some simulator partner horror stories, I feel like we could probably have 10 episodes on that.
I had a good one actually that is kind of unique. So I was paired up with a guy that was weak in the sim and kind of rusty.
Strong in the gym? That's a sick shirt. That is a sick shirt. Weak in the sim, strong in the gym with a dude curling a weight. Don't steal that, you guys.
And he was putting in the work, but he wasn't doing it the right way, and it was driving me nuts. So he was chair flying, which was awesome in 1995, but we have access to full FTDs, like the whole thing, and the cockpit switches work, FMS, the whole thing, right? He's like, no, I'm just going to chair fly. I'll be good tomorrow. Well, and we go in, it wouldn't go very well. And I'm like, dude, if you want, we can show up to our sim session an hour or hour and a half early, and we'll sit in the FTD together and we can run it together. And you can basically do everything we're going to do beforehand for free. It doesn't cost anything. And he wouldn't do it, wouldn't listen to me as his own way. And he was older, and maybe he was just kind of set in his ways or whatever. And he ended up getting pulled out and separated. And I'm sure he was fine, but I don't really know what happened. But that was interesting where it was kind of in between. The guy was putting in a ton of effort and time, but he wouldn't take advice and he wouldn't do it, utilize the tools that were available. And he just really struggled, made it more difficult for him than it needed to be. But
yeah, it's a good point. I also had a sim partner like that, studied and overstudied. And we've talked about this on the show before. You have to find time for yourself, going to the gym, going to the pool, going out to dinner with people, taking the weekends off or taking a day off to clear your mind, because you can get in that spiral of overstudying, studying the wrong stuff, having these freak out panic attacks and that kind of stuff. And all of it will just help you spiral and struggle. So it's a challenge. I know a lot of folks are going through training right now. So, Max, we got a new review.
Talk to me.
It came from G-Man Aviator, which just sounds like an aviation license plate. He says, my favorite aviation podcast. Great mix of substantive content, humor, and advice. Keep the calls with Ted coming. Well, listen to episode 81 and you can hear as much Ted as you want. G-Man, if you send us your address, we'll send you some stickers. And we'll send stickers to anyone who writes a review for the show. Good, bad, positive, negative, doesn't matter.
God, one day I'm going to see somebody with those stickers on their bag in the airport.
And just give them a high five.
Yeah.
It's going to be great.
Just a fist bump, respect fist bump.
Let's shamelessly plug our new hats. The latest curved performance version from our friends at Branded Bills with a nice 21.5 logo on the front. We have sold most of the camo hats.
Did you take a second one for yourself after you donated it to the depths of a remote Canadian lake a couple weeks ago?
Yeah. I was so proud of my new camo 21.5 hat. Max and I were on this fishing trip in Canada with his family.
We drive in and he hat flipped off in the middle of it, so it's somewhere in Canada at the bottom of the lake.
Yeah.
But,
these are awesome hats. They don't float. I'm going to just throw that out there.
Attest to that personally.
Yeah. 215podcast.com. You can click on the donate button. For $55, you can get a gray or a camo one. The hats are posted on our social media so you can see what they look like. They are awesome. Trust me. Our listeners, Troy and Mark, know exactly what we're talking about. They were the first two to purchase the hats. So thanks, fellas.
So we flew into a remote lake that's only accessible by float planes. So we show up to this deal right on the edge of the lake. They had beavers and caravans on floats, obviously, just tied up to the dock. And so we let our stuff up. We fly out there. It was pretty uneventful to fly out there, right? I mean,
well, you were in the right seat, so I was calm and safe. It was just
good.
Yeah.
So we stayed there, and then the way back, it was kind of more overcast, lower overcast. We're like, I wonder how this is going to work out. And you see him come in pretty low and land, and we take off, and we blast off. You were in the front. So
I was in the right seat, yeah. We were like 300 feet above the ground at all times.
Above the trees, but how far below the clouds? That's the important part.
We were probably 200 feet below the clouds. Maybe.
We're in this little window. Yeah, we're just zipping across the treetops, and I'm in the third row, way in the back. I'm just like, oh my God. So I did take a video of that, of like out the side window, zipping over the trees and stuff. So you can post that if you want or whatever. But it was kind of interesting. It's just so funny. The guy is a professional pilot that does it, right? He's been flying float planes. He flew BH-18s and like everything, and has been doing it forever, but couldn't be more different of a professional pilot than what we do. You know,
it was hilarious. I've never flown that fast, that low to the ground for such a sustained amount of time, because we were doing like 150 knots, and it's just like ripping. Because I guess when you're flying that low, you got to keep a ton of energy in the bank, Anyways, that's pretty funny.
Yeah, that was cool. Which that would be a good example of one of those cool jobs we say to do. It's just great. Like when you're flying every leg at the airline, at least you'll have a cool story to tell about what you did, instead of like that you worked for Mesa Airlines and went to Mesa Airline Pilot Development and then got a job at the airline, and that's it. Which, funny enough, is the last two captains in a row I've flown with.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. Both Mesa Airline Pilot Development guys. And
shout out to Mesa.
Tell us great stories about what it's like to fly at Mesa, which is always interesting.
Remember when at the regional airlines, they used to have that thing called stand-ups, which were the overnights that were less than 8 hours?
Continuous duty overnights?
CDO, yeah, high speed, some airlines call them. And at Mesa, they wouldn't get them a hotel room. So they call them, someone will write us in and tell us what it was called. I think it was called a camp out or a sleepover, but they would literally bring sleeping bags and sleep in the plane.
Where? Like in the aisle?
Yeah, this is true. We will have a Mesa listener that will write in and to confirm this.
I'll ask the captain I'm going to dinner with in an hour.
Oh, yeah. Ask him if he knew about that. Yeah. They had a name. It was like camp out or sleepover or something. Yeah. Ask him.
Anyway, so which somebody wrote in too with another really cool job that they posted on Pro Pilot World, right?
Yeah, go for it.
So this guy posted it and said, hey, this would be a really cool job. It's the job description: K2 Aviation in Talkeetna, Alaska. Now interviewing for the 2023 seasonal Denali National Park Glacier Tour pilot positions. Cessna 185, DHC-2T, and DHC-3T, which is Turbine Otter and Turbine Beaver.
Okay.
Wheel ski equipped aircraft. We train for Glacier operations, but tailwheel proficiency is a must. If you're airline bound, this is not the position for you. Come live the adventure.
Oh.
So just so we're clear, this is a company where they take tourists and sightsee and they land on glaciers on ski-equipped airplanes. That would go in the bucket of a cool job for.
That's amazing. Yeah. Cliff sent that to us. He says, as an old part-time CFI who sells software and still has kids in college, this is the kind of thing you advise the youngsters to pursue. I can only dream.
Yeah,
The
that's
kids
it.
should get all over this. Yeah. He sent us the link. I will post it down below. You do have to be a member of ProPilot World to be able to access it, but you should be anyways. So thank you for sending that in, Cliff. Appreciate it. I guess we're just diving right into the mailbag here. I like it. It's, of course, sponsored by our friends at Advanced Aircrew Academy, aircrewacademy.com. Next email says, hey, I have a question. I'm thinking about dropping out of college to pursue flight training full time. I know major airlines don't require degrees anymore, but do you think it's still important to have one? Also, what are your thoughts on United Aviate Academy? Thanks, Oliver. Max, why don't you go through all the pros and cons of United Aviate Academy off the top of your head? Go ahead. I'll wait.
We don't know each program in depth. We'll be the first to say that. They're constantly changing, but not heard of anybody that guarantees you anything. So just look at all of your options and evaluate carefully. I think that's the best advice as far as those programs are concerned. But as far as dropping out of college to pursue flight training full time, you can still go to college and do flight training. Like, it's not that hard, right?
Correct. 100% agree with you.
I mean, we did, but we didn't do all of our ratings in a really short period of time, but we were still doing instrument ratings and commercial and all that stuff while taking a full load of college classes.
Absolutely.
So I would not drop out of college. The airlines do not require degrees right now, but
Right now, yeah.
the requirements at every airline change quite drastically depending on the supply and demand. And so as soon as things aren't like this, college degrees, flight times will climb, minimum times, all of that stuff. So yeah, I would not leave that one behind.
Here's what I would do, Oliver. What's your financial situation? Are you taking out massive loans to go to a big aviation university? Okay, maybe that's not the path you want to take. Could you do your flight training and get your associate's degree at a community college down the street? That might be better. I still think James has laid this path out before. I think this is the best. If you can do it, go get your certificates and ratings while you're doing your associate's degree at a community college. Once you've got the associate's degree done and you've got your certificates and ratings, go flight instruct at a big university. You'll probably get tuition for free while you're instructing. You have to build time anyways.
Bingo, bango.
Finish off whatever part of your degree you can for free, probably, while you're instructing, while you're building time and making money. You can either finish your degree that way and then head off to, your next destination. Or if you get a job offer and you haven't quite finished that degree, you can probably do it online later while you're at your next time building job.
That's an awesome plan. That would be if the stars all align, which I don't know is necessarily realistic all the time. But if you were at a college where you were paying a lot of money, like a private school on the beach in San Diego or something, and then you're going to do flight training on top of that, unless you come from a very wealthy family, I would maybe switch colleges to the most of, because the reality of the matter is, if you want to be an airline pilot, the college degree, while the degree itself doesn't matter, when it was a requirement, the degree didn't really matter where it was from or what it was in. It was more just to have a 4-year degree. So keep that in mind and try and accomplish both goals in the most economic fashion.
At the end of the day, listen, the debt is going to limit your choices and flexibility. You know what we say, flexibility is the key to air power. The less debt you're going to have after school, the better. And it's going to allow you to take that Glacier job in Denali versus having to go pay the bills at Mesa with a sleeping bag. Last one, Max, actually wasn't an email, but it was a rare phone call, which you should tell the story of where we took this phone call. This is kind of funny.
It's so weird, dude. So we took the float plane in from Canada. We drove across the border to International Falls, Minnesota, and then we went from there to Minneapolis, St. Paul, and we had a long layover. And so we found out there's a PGA airport club. We're like, oh, and so let's go hang out in there and we can do whatever. We had nothing else to do. So we go in there and we had a listener that had called and said he wanted to talk to us. So we're like, oh, this is perfect. We're just hanging out. So we reached out to him. He was available. And so we asked the server, they had like music really loud on their stuff. Like, hey, is there anywhere we can make a phone call? And he's like, well, yeah, we have these private changing rooms over here. You guys could just go in there. So Dylan and I both walk across all these people that are in there and both into a private, like small changing room and shut the door.
Wait, we'll be right back.
Everyone had to been like,
It's a very important call.
yeah. So yeah, we called the listener and he had heard our episode about getting off your duff and attending one of these conferences, these aviation conferences, whether it's OBAP or GPA, all those ones that are around that all the recruiters come to. And we had inspired him, right?
Yep. He was listening to the show and he goes, what can I be doing extra to get a job? And he goes, you know what? I'm going to suck it up, buy a suit, pay for the fee to the convention and go down.
And an airline ticket and a hotel.
Yeah. Whole deal. And he got a conditional job offer from a major on the spot. Boom.
Yeah. So
that was awesome. Congratulations to Aaron.
It was awesome. It's great to hear.
Yeah. Yeah.
Once in a while, people listen to the show and it makes a difference in their life. So it was cool. I'm glad he reached out and it was great to actually talk to him. And so congratulations, Aaron. Crush.
Yeah. That's really cool. He had to spend a little bit of money and a little bit of time and maybe be away from his family, but he probably jumped several hundred seniority numbers over when he probably would have gotten a call, if at all. So it's huge. Every minute counts. All right. Well, that is it for the mailbag. If you'd like to get a hold of us, preferably by email and not by phone in a men's changing room, you can contact us at info@215podcast.com or send in some flight advice anonymously to us via our anonymous form on our website. See that prominently displayed. Thanks to our friends at Advanced Aircrew Academy for sponsoring the mailbag. Max, did you see their latest blog post? I think this is very relevant for you. It's called Pets on a Plane. And it talks about surveys of people and pet owners bringing their pets on the plane and stuff. You, as many of our listeners know, recently built an airplane and you bring your beloved dog Crunch along on several flights. Can you talk a little bit about how Crunch is outfitted on these flights?
Well, he has one of those bed things that you put in and then it hooks onto his harness and then the bed thing attaches to the seat. So it's kind of like a seatbelt, I guess, for dogs.
Yeah.
I don't know. So we have him in that thing strapped to the airplane and then he has a headset on and the whole thing. It's really funny. And I've heard this from several people. When you get your dog in a small airplane and you start it up, you put the headset on and they always want to paw it off or whatever. So you start the airplane up and it's obviously loud and they paw it off and all of a sudden they get this look like, oh my God, because it just got 100 times louder. And then you put the headset back on and they usually don't mess with it. So that only takes one of those evolutions. And then, but he used to like shake and freak out and now he just chills. Like it was bumpy too the other day when there's some turbulence and stuff and he was just racked out sleeping. So he's a flying dog now.
Love it.
Loves it.
Now, next time you guys fly, this blog post from Advanced Aircrew Academy goes on to say, NetJets has even started a popular Instagram hashtag called NetPets, #NetPets, where you can see the most adorable pictures of animals during air travel. So that's kind of interesting. You should tag some under NetPets and then be like, what airplane is that? I want to get a share of that thing.
I don't know if you heard this story, but one of our friends that that flies a BBJ, he flies for a gentleman and he goes, I was flying him around and he was the only one in the back of the airplane. He had his dog there too. And he was sitting in the back of the airplane with a tennis ball and throwing the ball up to the all the way to the front of the airplane because he goes, I hear this bang. And I look back and it's the tennis ball hitting the wood interior. Dog's running back and forth of a 737 plane fetch.
Oh my gosh. That's hilarious.
Remember, what about the other dude that's a Scottsdale airplane owner? This famous story. Remember, his dogs got quarantined in Hawaii and he sent the Falcon 900 all the way back to Hawaii empty just to pick up the golden retriever and fly back.
Listen. I think more and more, I would be very curious to see what the actual percentage of people that fly private just for their pets is. I bet it's bigger than you think. It's a big deal, I think. It's pretty funny. If you'd love to read more blog posts and maybe even subscribe to the newsletter from Advanced Aircrew Academy, I promise you're going to get a lot of great information. Yeah, it's incredible stuff.
We're not just saying
so. Definitely follow #NetPets and look for Max's dog with his headset to be posted in there soon. I think it'd be great.
#NetPets.
All right, let's move on to the main event, Max. I'm excited for this discussion we're going to have with Jenny Showalter. She's going to jump in and help us with our flight advice segment. It's going to be really good. I know everyone's going to enjoy it. Here we go. Max, we are so pleased to have Jenny Showalter joining us on the show today. Jenny is the Chief Motivational Officer for Showalter Business Aviation Career Coaching. And knowing you and I, we always need a little motivation in our life. So we're very excited to have Jenny on the line.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Jenny, if you've been in business aviation, your last name kind of sounds familiar. Why is that?
Well, I am blessed to be the third generation of my family in business aviation. My grandfather, his brother, and a cousin all started Showalter Flying Service in Orlando in 1945 after the war. And they had a dream that everybody would have an airplane instead of a car in their driveway or garage. And they started an air park, and it eventually grew and became quite a large FBO and based out of Orlando Executive Airport. My parents ran it for 40 years, and I worked there for 20 years before we sold it in 2015. And we were blessed beyond measure to have a business like we did. We had the best customers, the best employees. We hosted 9 NBA static displays during the years that we had the business. And we made customer service just our passion and our mission. And we had a great time doing it.
It's so awesome. And, just from our conversations with you, we can just tell you grew up in business aviation. You live and breathe this. And every time I walk away from a conversation with you, I'm just really impressed by your expertise. And I imagine it comes from just a very long exposure to the industry. So I salute you for sticking with it.
Yeah, when I was growing up, it was always something that mom and dad did. And I loved going there to the airport and to the FBO, because the line service guys would take me out in the fuel truck and we'd ride around in golf carts. And it just was very active and fun. And people always knew who I was, and I loved it. And it wasn't necessarily something that I saw myself joining until my parents sat me down when I was 22 and a fresh graduate from college and said, hey, we need you to come work for us for a year because we have the very first NBA static display coming. And that was 1996. And here I am all these years later. And I couldn't imagine doing anything other than what I do now.
That is a cool story. Well, we're going to get into a little bit about what you're up to here in a little bit, helping folks in business aviation find their best fits in their career. But first, I wanted to talk to you about a very hot topic. If you're not a regular listener on the show, you may not know that Max is a very active in pilot social media. He's constantly monitoring all of the memes and posts.
Constantly, my finger on the pulse of social media. That's me.
Extremely productive on there. But seriously, we have seen in the last 12 months a huge amount of content being created by folks talking about mental health, fitness for duty, kind of these less talked about topics in previous years in aviation are starting to come to the surface in our community. And I know you've had a chance to dive into this a little bit. You spoke to a group recently about fitness for duty. Can you talk to us a little bit about this topic and what you're seeing out there and what you've learned?
Yeah, sure. I actually spoke at the Flight Safety Foundation BAS conference back in May, and I was asked to do it. And I was on this panel with psychologists and doctors who were talking about the fitness for duty and the mental health aspects. And I'm like, I'm a career coach. I'm not very sciencey. So you'll have to excuse me. But I think that you can very much, from my perspective, link satisfaction with your job as well as satisfaction with things at home to how you perform at work. And so that was really what my topic was, is about, making sure that your best self to go and fly by making sure that things at home and at work are as good as they can be. And if they're not, you need to be able to share that with somebody. There should be some kind of a mechanism or a program in place within these flight departments that people feel safe to go and say something, because, as pilots, you're supposed to be bulletproof. You can't do anything wrong. Everything has to be right. You have to show up and you have to be primed and ready every single time you go. And we all know that that's just not always possible. And my husband flies for a corporate flight department, and they're 2 pilots and 1 airplane. And it's just the way that they're made. And if somebody's having a bad day or something's going on, it's good to have that open communication to say, hey, maybe can this be your leg today? I had a rough day. Or something along those lines. And there are too many places, especially in business aviation, which is my area of expertise, where that's not the case, where people don't feel safe. We have pilots that are constantly worried about maintaining their medicals. You can't just wave a white flag and say, I'm depressed or I have a substance abuse issue. There are things that you can't say because your job, your career, your license could be at stake for this. And so I do certainly understand the consequences to that, but I think that as an industry, we need to do a better job of providing a platform to be able to talk about these things. And as part of that presentation that I did, I asked the audience of about 200 people, a safety conference. So these were safety managers, even directors of aviation from flight departments. And I asked some questions in a blind poll. And I asked, in the past year, have you felt mentally, physically, emotionally, or spiritually unfit for duty? And 72% said sometimes, which I thought was a big number. I wasn't quite expecting that. 13% said often, and 15% said never. And I would venture to guess that those 15% that said never aren't being really honest with themselves. And I went on then to ask, if you answered sometimes or often, did you still perform as scheduled, call out sick, talk to a colleague, and ask for help? Or was there some other outcome? And 64% said that they still performed as scheduled. So that's a whole lot of people who aren't their best self, who know it, but they're out there performing their duties anyways. And for those that answered that they still performed as scheduled, I asked what the reasons were. And 40% said there was no backup for their position. And 34% said they felt like there was no other choice. And there were a few that also said they were worried about their job security if they said they couldn't do it that day. So as an industry, I think we need to do better. And I think the pandemic has given us an opportunity where maybe mental health has been talked about more. There have also been some high profile, very sad things that have happened recently as well to highlight this issue. And I don't have all the answers, but if we're not having the conversation, we're never going to get to an answer.
Yeah, that's a challenging problem. And it's interesting because at the airline level, of course, with the economy of scale and everything, that's been handled with programs where you can call if you have issues and stuff on your mind, or if you have physical stuff going on. Or even the other day, I had something going on and I was on a trip and it was in the evening time. We were leaving super early in the morning. And my first leg was back to Phoenix where I live. And I called the chief and I was like, hey, I got something going on and I'm fit. I'm good. I can fly to Phoenix, but I'm going to need to get off there and go handle this at home. And we talked for a while. He goes, you know what, man? I'm going to make this call for you. I'm just going to pull you off the whole flight. So there's a flight that leaves tonight at 7. Just get your stuff and go to the airport and we'll handle the rest. And that's one of those things where it's like, wow, it is really nice to have that support. But I've also been in the other position where I wasn't 100% and in a 2-man flight department or 2-person flight department, I should say. And that's a lot of pressure and you don't have those options. And it's a lot easier when your boss is a pilot because they understand. But when they're not, that's a sticky situation. And like you said, it's not a problem that's easy to solve. And I don't think any of us have the answer. But to your credit, there is some things I think that organizationally through, I don't know, NBAA always comes to mind, but there's a bunch of other ones where we could have like the airlines have something called like Project Lift where you can call and this and that. And it seems like that one to have somewhere to call should be something that could happen, right?
I think that's a great option. And I know for substance abuse, there's the HIMSS program in the airlines as well. In small flight departments or even large flight departments in big companies, we just don't have that available to everyone in the industry. And I think that, again, having this conversation is going to be how we eventually get to some kind of a change or an answer, but we don't have those now.
It's just so unhealthy to have a group of people that are afraid to get treatment for something because it's such a bad situation.
Well,
or like depression is the easy one that comes to mind, you know, people that in a different line of work, it's easy. And it's easy to seek treatment, I should say, not to get better, but it's certainly easy to do something about it. Whereas in our line of work, it's really not. And I think there's a lot of people that are in bad shape because of it.
Well, I don't think it should be a punishment to ask for. I don't think that that should be the case. And so instead, we've created this culture where people keep this all to themselves. They lie under the radar and they don't share these things for fear of literally their livelihood, their careers, and for most of you, their passion. Most pilots I know, when I talk to people, say, how did you get involved in aviation? And I mean, most of them have a story of when they were a little kid and they flew with their dad or lived by an airport and watched the plane. I mean, this is something that is deeply rooted in who we are in this industry, and to threaten taking that away. I mean, if I was depressed, it would make me more depressed.
I mean, the other thing too is the safety ramifications of it. If people, just that story I just told, they said, look, this is stuff you have going on. If your head's on 100% on flying the jet, then we care about you. We want you to be able to take care of your family, but we also have the certificate to protect. And if we want to keep people out of the cockpit that aren't 100% focused on what they're doing. And that's why obviously the airlines look at it from a safety perspective. And that's why we can call them fatigue. And you have all these options that you don't in business aviation, but you should. They're trying to mirror a lot of the things that we do that the airlines have created from a safety standpoint with FOCWF ADAPT, the data reporting and SMS, all this stuff. But this is one where I think they could there's got to be a way to take some of what the airlines have figured out for this and spin it to business aviation.
The biggest challenge, I think, in business aviation is bearing the cost of that on a million small flight departments, especially, is a big challenge. But I wanted to think about one of the advantages that we have in business aviation versus perhaps a larger carrier like airlines or maybe fractional is that we're typically flying with either the same person or one of maybe 2 or 3 people all the time. And I know, Max, in your experience has probably been similar when the other pilot isn't at 100%, if you've been working with them for a while. And if we can challenge ourselves as a group to kind of maybe see when we observe that, to give an opener almost, or not a way out, but an initiation of the conversation to the other pilot. Say, hey, it doesn't seem like you're feeling sharp today. Is there something you want to talk about? Or are you feeling up to this? And we can find somebody else if there's something going on. But I think almost as I'm not going to say the quote unquote healthy person, but maybe the person that's not having an issue is almost the best way to help facilitate this, because we've talked about a million times, one of the biggest enemies of a pilot is wanting to complete the mission and be the hero. And I think as the fellow pilot, maybe we can help to open that up. I don't know. What do you think about that, Jenny?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it boils down to culture as well. I think a lot of flight departments out there and a lot of leaders especially think that they run a very open operation. But if you talk to their employees, they might have a different opinion of that. And I think so many times they fly up, they show up, fly the mission and go home when it's all done, instead of going to dinner as a team or doing something with families and making that small additional investment to be close to one another and to show interest in each other and build team. And so I think that open culture where people can feel safe to come and share that, it's not a good day or there's something going on at home. I mean, how many people in this industry have been through a divorce, a parent that's ill or dying? So many things have happened. We all go through those times. We all have those things happen. But to be able to be open about it and to maybe let somebody else carry the load for a day, it's not a bad thing. But we have to create a space where it feels like people can take you up on that.
Yeah. And I think there's so many chances. It's like we're the perfect storm in business aviation to tackle this, because not only do you have the personalities and all that, but you also have this super tightrope of passenger confidence in there as well. Mm-hmm. And now you want the passengers in the back, especially if they're the same passengers often, to have trust in you, and to have faith in you. And so I think for a lot, it's an easy trap to fall in, to always look like the hero to those passengers. And it is true. I mean, obviously they need to have confidence in you, but it's also like this other message you have to communicate to the passengers, like, hey, so-and-so isn't feeling good today, so they're not going to fly. And they may go, what does that mean? Like, is he not a good pilot or whatever, So, and that's got to be done on an individual level for every flight department again, So, I mean, there's just so many different difficulties in our side of aviation to tackle it. And like we said, we don't have all the answers, but I definitely think it's interesting to have this conversation to start to get the wheels turning for sure.
I agree. And I completely understand that you always want to look good in front of the owners, that you have other relationships. Yes, you do walk that fine line. You're on that tightrope with them. But there's no reason that the passengers really need to know. I think it can be something that can be handled internally at the flight department level without the passengers. But there should be, I think, in many of our flight departments, a process in place for this. And I think leaders should come and say, let's be open about this. If we're not having a good day, let's be able to talk about it. I don't need details. I don't need to know everything that's going on, but I do want to know if you're not your best, because safety is first and foremost.
That's well said.
Yeah. It trickles down, obviously, from the size, the biggest organizations being big airlines to then larger corporate flight departments, all the way down to the 2-person flight department is where it's most challenging. And I think it's one of those things that if you tell the principal that you have stuff going on and you're not fit to fly right when there's a trip right in front of you, I think that's the worst case scenario, right?
Yeah.
But it may be one of those things where you sit down and be like, listen, our job as the flight crew of your airplane is to operate, number one, in the safest manner possible. And that includes things with maintenance and weather and all the stuff you think about. And then there's other things you don't think about. And maybe it's a discussion you just have with the principal and say, hey, if there's stuff going on and someone's head is not in the game, can I count on you to not give us pushback if we have to get a contract pilot because somebody is not fit to fly? Maybe that's because they have a stomach virus, or maybe that's because their partner just left them the night before and their head's not in the game. And I think that's probably the best way I can think of off the top of my head to handle something like that, to say, hey, we're going to have somebody else sitting in the right seat today.
Yep.
And remember that talk we had 6 months ago? You don't need to ask a bunch of questions, but just keep that in mind,
Right.
and we'll
Yeah.
get you to where you're going to go, and we'll do it safely as we always do. So I think that's probably the best way to battle in that really tough scenario of the two-person.
That may be how many two-person flight departments are there out there. So we need to have that conversation, get the message out, and then tenfold it needs to be enacted.
Yeah.
So, but having a space for honesty, having a space where people feel safe to come and share, no matter if that's the director of the flight department, a chief pilot, maybe it's one of the people you fly with, but having a space where they can do that, I think that's the beginning of the conversation, at least.
Yeah. And whenever we have one of these discussions about the mental health of aviators, we always get some really interesting feedback from the listeners. So those of you that are listening and have something to say, please don't hesitate to write in. Remember, you can do it anonymously via our website and fill out the form. Or of course, you can email us at info@215podcast.com. But we do want to hear, because I think these discussions are important, and they've proven that in the past. So speaking of somebody with conflict, Dylan, we did have a listener write in. You want to read that one?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. One other thing I wanted to tie up before we jump off of this topic. What you mentioned, Max, I love about heading it off at the pass, having this conversation early with the principal. I think in general, one of the biggest quality of life things you can do for your pilots, if you're the director or the chief pilot, lead pilot, whatever you want to say, get an established and approved contract pilot budget for every year. If you can get that approved ahead of time, it takes all that stress away and you can tie that in. So I think that's huge. If folks want to comment, we're just scratching the surface. And honestly, people have asked us to do a show about this before. And it's a daunting topic because there is no clear solution. And I think that's what is such a challenge. You know, I'm starting to see online folks coming out and saying they're being life coaches for pilots and they're providing help in that way. So I think there are definitely some opportunities. I know there's an entire podcast devoted to this topic called The Pilot's Pandemic. We'll have a link to that in the show notes as well. And I know they're exploring the topic. Yeah. So there's certainly a lot there. We expect to hear from folks on this, and we're excited to dive into a little bit more. So switching gears a little bit, Jenny, you said you're doing some career coaching now. We're going to put you to the test right away.
Okay. All right. I'm ready.
We have a little segment brought to you by our friends at Harvey Watt Insurance, and it's called Flight Advice. And it's where we attempt to give a listener some advice. Of course, it's worth exactly what they paid for it, which is zero. So they can take it to the bank. But airmen, pilots write into us from time to time, and usually career-related questions they have. So this one comes in from David. And we'll read this one and let's see if you can give him some advice, Jenny. He says, I'm a SoCal-based corporate pilot with a conditional job offer from a low-cost carrier. I've got 2 young kids, and my current flying schedule offers minimal nights away, typically 4 to 8 nights gone in a month. Pay is great, too. The problem is, unless I've got a contract pilot on standby, I can't take true time off. Even if we only get a couple short notice trips per year, I'm on the hook when they happen. And then there's the owner's whims. Although he's a great guy, I'm never quite sure what time we're coming home until the last minute, that sort of thing. My wife, who wants to know when I'll leave and when I'll return, isn't a fan of the whimsical schedule. I've never heard the business aviation
schedule. I love that.
described as whimsical. And as for me, although the company has employed the other pilot for 25 years, I really want to know I'm working at a career employer, not some corporate unicorn job that'll vanish once the owner decides to sell the plane or go to NetJets. I'm low time, sub 2,000 hours, and I'm pacing only 250 hours per year. So what happens if I'm on the street before I hit 3,000 hours, which is a typical minimum for most other corporate PAC gigs? I'm beginning to think that even if airline flying meant more nights away, the fact of having a true schedule, one that I could even control somewhat with a bit of seniority, would make my wife happier. But I know in the short term, there'd be a huge quality of life and pay hit. With young kids, that's tough to swallow. I can't ask you guys to make the call for me, but have I thought of everything? The low-cost carrier would require a short commute with like 12 flights at some on-company airplanes. A 4-hour drive if I really needed. The wife has a secure, well-paying job, which means we aren't moving to the airline base. Thanks for all the great thoughts. There are a lot of us looking at real-world choices nowadays, and your insight helps.
Yeah, he had me at whimsical schedule. I am a pilot's wife, and I have absolutely never thought of it as that, but I'll go with
Whimsical
it.
makes it sound like everyone's kind of enjoying it, and it's fun.
Yeah, like jumping from cloud to cloud. Just...
Whee!
Yeah. Well, my husband's far away right now, so it's not so whimsical here at the moment, but I actually like it when he's here. But my goodness, there's a lot to unpack there. And, truly, I understand. I mean, I talk with clients that are in all phases of life. Being a young pilot that's relatively low time, having young children at home, I know you want to be there all the time and see everything that happens. Having no hard time off, that's certainly something to consider. But the job pays well. You're only gone 4 to 8 nights a month. That's not too much. And trust me, as the kids get older, they will get busier and they will do more cool things, and you will want to be there for those as well. So it's easy to focus on where you are right now, but you also need to be looking into the future. And if you look at the airline, I mean, sure, you've got the known schedule, you've got relatively known pay, and it is what it is. It's that airline lifestyle, I believe. And there are plenty of people that have gone before you and that it really works well for. So something to consider for sure. The corporate lifestyle, I'm glad that you love your current gig and that things are really good, minus the hard time off. Can't think of very many people that I know in this industry, especially on the corporate side, that have only ever had one job, though. That's just not what we do here. I have a stack of pilot resumes right next to me. And I mean, most of them have had 4, 5, 6 jobs before it's all said and done. And that's pretty common. You have to think that there are a lot of things out there that are outside of our control. We didn't see the pandemic coming. Maybe we see a recession on the horizon. Maybe we're already in one. And aviation reacts to other things in the world. And so there is no magic bullet for this. I mean, we just saw lots of big airline layoffs. Who knows what's going to happen if the economy doesn't turn around in business aviation, or if your owner passes away. There are so many what ifs, but I would really tell you to focus on your passion, what it is you want to do. Do you want to do the airline lifestyle? Do you want to do the corporate lifestyle? Do you like the extra that's involved in the corporate? Or is it really just schedule that's driving your decision making? And figure out what your passions are, really hone in on that with yourself, and look into the future a little bit. Don't look where you are right now, but look into the future and envision what your life is going to look like in 5 or 10 years as your kids get older, and then see what you think is the best call for you. There's risk in everything in aviation. It's inherent. It's just there. We've all experienced it if we've been doing this long enough. You've got to find the thing that is going to be the best for you for the shorter term.
I think that's good advice. In his specific situation, it's a tough call. And I think the big thing that changes the dynamic here, of course, is that it's airline versus corporate, but he's talking about commuting airline versus corporate, which is a whole nother animal. And I've always been not a big proponent of commuting, but I totally get it. And the one thing that we've said is, he mentioned NetJets and the fractionals, but that's always kind of like the in-betweener of these two situations, where with home basing and this gentleman could live at home and maybe still do the corporate flying, but get kind of the mix of the more rigid scheduling and things like that. And so that's something that's interesting for people to explore. And in aviation, the music stops in this big game of musical chairs sooner or later. And I think you do need to keep in mind too, you want to go somewhere that you might be okay hanging out for a while. So I think I would consider those jobs are just such a good compromise.
And with the fractionals, he's got good time building opportunities as well, though.
That's a good point.
So more so than 250 hours a year.
Yeah, that's a great point.
What David is struggling with right now is something called a false duality. And that's thinking that there are only two choices here.
Yeah, that's
It's
true.
not like you can just stick at your job or go to this low-cost carrier and commute. You said you lived in Southern California. There's tons of different options here. I think in this scenario, going with the first place that's giving you a job offer may not be the smart thing to do here. I agree with what Max and Jenny are saying about you've got low time. You're sub 2,000 hours and you're only flying 250 hours a year. This is a classic trap that we see a lot of people get stuck in. I got stuck in it, and it's that you get that high quality of life, low flight time job too earlier in your career.
When you have too little flight time.
Right. And this happened to me with 1,500 hours, and I was at this 100-hour-a-year airplane. I'm like, this is amazing. And I have all this free time. It was great, except it didn't get me to the exactly like what you're saying, Jenny. You're going to have 15 more jobs. Like, this isn't going to be the final stop. So I would say my advice is you may not be wrong in looking for a different job, but don't stop at this job offer from this low-cost carrier where you got to commute. There's way more opportunities out there. And obviously, if you want to build some flight time, you're going to have to suck it up and make some sacrifices at home. If you want to do that or not, I don't know. Maybe you realize you don't.
It's a pilot's market right now, and don't lose sight of that either. Just like a seller's market and the housing market, it's a pilot's market, and I don't see that going away anytime soon. So don't undervalue yourself and your worth in this. I'm definitely a fan of checking out multiple options, not just going with the first. I think that's very 100%. Solid.
And here's another thing. If you love where you're at, like we mentioned before, talk to your chief pilot, tell him where you're at and be like, look, man, this schedule's killing me. You know, I got the kids at home. Can we get a contract pilot budget? Oh, by the way, did you know that it's going to take 9 months to get my replacement pilot into training right now because the training center's so backed up? So if I leave, like, this is an issue. And
you have 9 months of contract pilots anyway. So
yeah, exactly. So I think you have some leverage right there. And obviously you're not going to be as direct as that, but you could maybe start there. If that's all it's going to take is some contract pilot coverage to stay where you're at, it could be worth it too. But man, like Jenny said, there's a lot of options out there right now. So yeah,
take advantage of where things are at to improve your position.
Yeah, Southern Cal especially. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's quite the market there. And if he's saying his pay is great and he's in Southern California, then that's something to consider too.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, hopefully that was helpful, David. Let us know. We love the follow-up emails. That's our favorite part. So keep us posted.
Yeah, we always give all of the super valuable advice. Then we never hear what happens.
Yeah.
Real cliffhanger.
Jenny, I'll have his email address so you can just send the invoice directly to him later on. Max, when it comes to sim partners in training, it's hard to know who to trust. Some sim partners are eating jambalaya at 8 a.m. and might fall asleep. Other sim partners might be visiting old friends and not studying their call-outs. Even more other sim partners might not even know that they're supposed to fly the airplane. When you get in that training center, trust no one. Just take care of yourself. You know who you can trust, though? It's our friend, certified financial planner and fiduciary, Tim Pope. He has been helping professional pilots nationwide create and execute a smart financial strategy. Timothy P. Pope, your financial planning partner for all phases of your financial flight. Check the show notes for a link to book your free appointment with Tim. I promise he'll be prepared for the call. He's going to know all the right things to do. Check it out. Okay, back to the show. So I'm curious, like, you're talking to clients all over the country, right? And you're providing coaching.
Yeah.
You said it's obviously a pilot's market right now. Everybody has a job. And so everybody's only taking a quote unquote better job, or I would say most people, right? Or a job that's got a specific objective they're trying to meet. How are you helping clients evaluate their goals and figuring out where it is they actually will fit and what's going to make them happy?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's individual for everybody. It's individual. It's not one size fits all. And I don't just work with pilots. I work with mechanics and people from SBOs and people that work for management companies. I mean, all over the spectrum of business aviation. But I think it's different for everyone. You've got to sit down and you've got to really decide what your motivators are. Just like I was saying for David, you've got to sit down and you've got to look at what's important to you right now and what's going to be important to you in the future. And I think there are a lot of people out there who, especially right now, they're like, well, I have a job. The markets are changing a little bit. Not really sure what to do. It's not the best job, but I think they're afraid to take that step. They're afraid to consider leaving the safety. And I think there are a lot of people out there who aren't living up to their potential with their job. And then just conversely, I think there are a lot of people that are really looking at this moment in time as an opportunity to better their position. And they come to me and they say, what can I do to better position myself for growth in the future? I've been a pilot, but I'm really ready to be a chief pilot or director of aviation. What do I need to do to get there? And so I think it's just assessing everybody on an individual basis and seeing where they are, what their best skill sets are, what makes them unique. And I ask most everybody I work with, what makes you unique? And it's crazy. Some people really struggle with it. And I do a lot of mock interviews with people too. And I say, well, one of the first things you ask is, well, tell me about yourself. And you'd be surprised at how many blank stares I get back at me. What do you want to hear from me? What am I supposed to be telling you? And I tell people to, own your story, own the things that you do really well, and look for a job and a career that's going to really feed the things that are you.
That's really well said. We've talked about before. It can be easy to find the quote unquote dream job that you've dreamed about your whole career. And then you get there and you're like, wait a minute. I never really thought about what I wanted. I always just thought about, well, I see the kind of the well-worn path that everyone takes to get to to this job. So that introspection, in a way, all this stuff we're talking about with pilots is so challenging because I think so many pilots are so focused on the mission a lot of times that they don't pause to take that time to reflect about what they want, what their goals are, mental health issues, and kind of all that. It just doesn't seem like that's really an obvious thing for pilots, many of the pilots I've been around at least.
This is a high pressure industry. It's not a 9-to-5 world that we live in. There are a lot of type A personalities out there. And I think we're always just moving forward and just, you get caught up in that momentum and you forget sometimes to just look at where you are and take that moment to assess and to ask yourself the questions. And it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for a lot of people to be in that space. I always say, especially in the pilot world, there's a checklist for everything you do as a pilot when you get in the airplane, but there's no checklist for life outside the cockpit. And you should take a little time every once in a while to really do that. And it's amazing. There are people that come to me for a resume rewrite. And when I interview them to gather the information to work on their resume, they're like, wow, I haven't really thought about this in a long time. What is it that makes me special? What is it that I do? They'll say, well, I worked at this job and I was a pilot. I'm like, okay, but what did that look like? What other things did you do? And you really have to push people. And once you do that and you get those wheels turning, it's amazing. They come back to me for more stuff. They want to do one-on-one coaching. It kind of ignites and it's hard to get that started. But once you do, I think that it really helps guide you to a place that will get you more fulfillment out of your career.
Easy for us to say after doing it for 20 years. Harder to understand when you're just getting into the industry.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Like if you're just like, I just got to get my flight time. I got to get my licenses rating.
Yeah.
It's amazing how your perspective changes over time with this stuff.
Yeah. And I talk to a lot of people who don't even know where to start in this industry. They don't even know where to start. And maybe they've gotten a bunch of their ratings and everything. They've had their head down in flight school.
Then you kind of figure it out, I guess, which is just having more broad perspective on everything.
Or they're graduating from one of the aviation schools and then they're like, oh, okay, now I have all of this. What do I do with it? I don't know. And one of the things that I love to do too is the airlines are the obvious choice for most people, many people. And I'm a passionate person about business aviation. That's where I've spent my entire career and some might argue life. And so I love to share the message of business aviation and walk somebody through what a career in business aviation could look like, because it opens a lot of eyes oftentimes too, especially for those young folks.
Certainly. All right. Couple more questions for you. One thing that Max and I don't know a ton about is the other side of this career game, which is employers looking for pilots. It's so weird because in certain times in the economy, it's like, well, you don't really need to look very hard because you get a million resumes for every job posting. But then there are other times and there are other more enlightened employers that are, no, they actually kind of know what they're looking for. They have very specific things that they want for a pilot or traits or qualities, stuff like that. You used to work in kind of that recruiting element. Can you talk a little bit about what that's like? Is that still a thing in this current environment? What's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, it's still a thing. There are still a lot of companies out there who their business, whatever it is, isn't the business of pilots. they happen to have a flight department, but that's not their business. That's not their specialty. And so oftentimes those companies will come to a recruiting firm and they will ask for help. And I think one of the key pieces of that recruiting process is getting to know the clients and getting to understand what the flight department looks like, the makeup of it, talking to all of the people in the flight department independent of one another. So you can get all of the information, good, bad, and different, about what an operation looks like. And then it's helping them find someone who's a good fit for their company and for their particular needs. And the needs vary. A lot of the needs are sometimes based on maybe they got burned by another hire that they had at one point in time. And so they don't want that, but they want something else. Maybe they have a hole in their team that they need to fill that's got a niche or a specialty. Maybe they're looking to diversify their team. All of those things can be kind of the impetus behind this, whether they're used to be that they weren't all willing to type. Then they went through a period where they're like, oh, we'll type anybody. And now, as you guys alluded to, we can't get training slots. So now I've seen more and more of the ads out there I've seen have gone back to, type rating preferred because it's so long before they can get you into train. But all of those things, all those little nuances really can play a big role. And the culture of the flight department, some of them are quite unique. And some of them need somebody special to join that team who can get their quirks. It just all depends on what it is they're looking for. But usually we were given pretty clear marching orders as to what they wanted. And then the challenge became finding somebody who could fit into that mold.
Did you ever go in and meet and kind of get the feel of the flight department, either the principal or like the chief pilot or someone who's just a nightmare? They're just going to be extremely difficult to work for. And you just like walk out shaking your head and be like, how am I going to find somebody that's going to put up with this?
Yes. There are a lot of big personalities in this industry, and we serve a lot of big personalities. And so, yeah, sure. There were some that were much easier to fill than others. I don't think we were ever not successful filling a role, but some of them we really had to go into the toolbox pretty deep to find someone who would be the right fit. And the challenge is, you had to go out with the need of the company in mind and the position that they were hiring for, obviously. But then you also had the care and the concern for the people that were interviewing and then ultimately whoever got the job, because it's very high stakes. You're moving somebody most of the time. It's rare that you get somebody who's living in the area. I mean, it's usually uprooting families. It's uprooting lives. It'd be great if 100% of the time it was a great fit and it all worked out perfectly. And most of the time it did. But there were a couple one-offs where it didn't. And you feel really bad when you can't make that marriage work well. But the majority of the time it does. And you change lives and change the trajectory of families, literally. Children go to different schools. They live in different areas. And it's a lot of responsibility, but a lot of reward that came from that.
If you will, just a little whipped cream on it, Dylan. And let's just really dress it up. Do you have any sprinkles or anything else you want to add? Or
I've got some sprinkles here. Yeah. Come on, let's go.
Who are you?
So, no, to circle back to our earlier conversation about smaller flight departments for a lot of these operations, a lot of times maybe they're not in a position to hire a recruiter, or they may not have the luxury of being able to really deeply investigate their corporate culture. But I think as a candidate and as a job seeker, the service that Jenny's providing, where she's helping you to figure out what is important to you, what are your goals, how can you articulate what it is that you bring and what you need, quite frankly, that I think can give you a real leg up. Great, a resume and everything may get you in the door, but if you're actually, as a small flight department manager, talking to somebody and you go, this guy knows what he wants, or this gal has a goal, or she has an objective or something like that, I think that can really set you apart, even if maybe you're on the experience side, you may not have everything, or maybe there are more competitive candidates. That finding the fit is so key.
It is. And I always tell people, don't be haphazard about this. I mean, you should put a strategy. If you want to make a move, if you want to make a change, you need to strategize that change. I had an airline captain who came to me not long ago who had taken early retirement during the pandemic and 62 years old and bored out of his mind. He's like, I want to fly again. And when I met him, he was like throwing resumes like darts at everybody who posted a job posting. And I'm like, whoa, wait a second. What do you want? And he told me, he said, well, I love where I live and I help out with my granddaughter and I love to sail. But then, I flew planes all around the world and that was really cool too. So I think a G650 would be great. And I was like, but wait, you just told me you love to be home and you love to take care of your granddaughter and you like to sail and maybe something smaller. Maybe it's not for the money at this point. And so we put a I said, stop sending out resumes. Hey, stop. Don't do anymore. And let's back it up and let's talk about this and let's figure out what you want. And through a process that took a couple of months, he was like, you know what? I don't want to pack the big suitcase anymore. I really don't. I did that for so many years and I don't anymore. And I like taking my granddaughter to her dance class. And he found a great opportunity as the third pilot on a small jet and Part 91, and he's loving life. But I think so often we get knee-jerk about the things about our career because either something happened to us or we're not happy about something, and we forget to strategize. So stop and think about what you're doing.
All right, Jenny, I've been dying this whole episode to ask you about this. So with your experience in growing up for a large portion of your life in the FBO scene with your family business, we know you've got to have a couple of good stories or at least one good one. And also we wanted to give you an opportunity to let pilots know what not to do in regards to FBOs.
Help us
Go
out.
ahead.
We want to be better. We know we're terrible in the FBO. Help us out.
Okay, well, I'm going to start with the what not to do. Now, mind you, I've been removed from the FBO industry for just over 7 years, but I'm pretty sure a lot of this holds true.
Pilots have not changed. We have not changed.
Yeah. No, your passenger is not the most important person on the planet. They are not. They will be taken care of in the order that they came. They are not the most important person. Don't steal stuff. We had more throw pillows. Honest to God, we had throw pillows. And we're like, how did they even get them out of here? Did they like put them under their shirt and take them out? I don't know. Paper towels, Kleenex, Listerine out of the bathroom, like whole bottles of Listerine taken out. And it's like, you don't have to do that. And I would also say it's the pilot that stands across the counter from the CSRs and taps the fingers on the table in front while they're obviously doing other things, really busy, maybe on the phone, on the radio, writing a rental contract, and the pilot's there tapping the fingers. And no, we don't always have free stuff.
What kind of free stuff do you guys have here? I love it.
Listen to this. We are going to purchase 100 gallons. Do you have any leather jackets for the crew?
What about that throw pillow over there? Can you throw that in if I buy an extra 50 gallons? That way I won't have to steal
They
it.
totally didn't ask about that. No, they didn't ask about it. Yeah, in addition to don't steal things from the FBO, don't steal the crew cars either. That's not a good thing either. So we had that happen a few times over the years.
Like when you say steal, like, can you expand on that a little bit?
I think they went out for like a 2-hour max or something, plenty of time to go get food and whatever. And it was a pretty busy FBO. So we always had a couple cars and everything, but we had one that was gone for a couple of days at one point. And we actually, I think we had to file a police report. And then all of a sudden it comes tripping back in with it. It was years ago, but it was a big old blue and white Suburban, huge. And it's like, how could that be missing? But yeah, I mean, they definitely kept it over the 2-hour limit. And no, we weren't happy.
All right, Jenny.
I love after all this, you decided to marry a pilot. Good call, Jenny.
Yeah, good call.
Well, you can't say that you weren't warned.
I did. I trust me, I am well aware. And it's funny, I never thought that I was looking for a pilot or anything, and I really wasn't, but it just sort of happened that way. And it's wonderful when you're in a relationship in this industry and your spouse is part of the industry too. I mean, I would never call the schedule whimsical, obviously, because it's not. Sometimes it's maddening, but I mean, we have a deep understanding of what each other does, and it really does make for an extra meaningful part of our relationships that we can share and understand each other's work. And when he has to go away for 3 weeks at a time, like he is right now, I mean, I get it. And I know what my role is, and he knows what his is. And, we make it work.
A lot of me time. It's good.
It's a lot of me time. Oh, yeah. There's that.
I love it. You already gave us a good crew car story. Any other good stories come to mind?
Oh, my gosh. There's so many. I'll tell you one of the ones that stood out to me over the years that I thought was pretty cool. Because, I come from this like legacy FBO, and I was the third generation in it. So I was a little late to the party. I wasn't the first Showalter to get there. And with lots of celebrities that flew in over the years, and too many to count. But this one time, Steven Tyler flew in, and somebody had to go into the FBO to do something, and the limo was pulled out to the plane, and I'm out there with him, just kind of shooting the breeze and with the pilots, and he comes out and he sits on the hood of the limo and he says, "Come here, you sit down here." And I had my Jenny Showalter name tag on, and the name of the business was big in letters over the ramp. And he looked at it and he was like, "Huh, they named this place after you." And I was like, yes, they did. Yes, they did. So it was one of those days that the boss's daughter, who came late to the party, felt very vindicated.
That's funny.
That's awesome. Man. Well, Jenny, this has been really enjoyable. I think your perspective from a lifetime in business aviation is so refreshing and needed for folks. So I'm glad that you're providing this service for people in our industry that are looking for help, looking to find opportunities and get to know themselves better too at the same time. Thank you for your just getting the conversation started on this fitness for duty. You know, like we said, hey, we don't have all the answers. We'd love to hear from folks to learn more about this together. We recognize that this is something that in our industry we want to improve. So we talked a little bit about your career coaching service. Can you just tell folks where they can find you?
Absolutely. They can find me. It's really easy. Showalter.com. Boom.
I love it.
I love that though. So if you're in business aviation and even if you're beyond a pilot, but anybody in business aviation, mechanics, schedulers, dispatchers, anybody, huh? Do it all.
Yeah, absolutely. I do it all. One-on-one coaching, resume writing, LinkedIn reviews, and one of my favorites, the mock interview. Oh. So good.
Tell us about a time you were at an FBO and you thought about stealing something.
Yeah, no, that's a fun process to go through and to see somebody's growth from the beginning of the interview to the end. It's a really collaborative, instant feedback kind of process. And I really love giving people the opportunity to leave feeling empowered and like they're on top of their interview game.
Well, we'll have a link in the show notes, but you're not going to need it because it's so easy to remember. It's just showalter.com.
Showalter.com.
All right. Thanks, Jenny.
Thanks, Jenny.
Thank you.
All right, Dylan, that's another segment on mental health and aviation. It's always a tough one to wrestle with, but I think we came up with some good ideas and hopefully provided some good perspective.
I think the conversation's just starting. That's where I'm excited to see what's coming in the future. So please provide your feedback to us on what resources you found or where you want to see this conversation go next. So thanks to Jenny Showalter for joining us. Of course, showalter.com for all of your career coaching needs. Special thanks to Harvey Watt, our longtime insurance partner, providing loss of medical insurance and life insurance to professional pilots around the globe, and Advanced Aircrew Academy on the pulse of pet aviation. They will not stop. aircrewacademy.com. Also, special thanks to Christian for all that he does for both of us, really.
Yes, all he does. Very valuable.
And I think he shot in like 3 license plate for us this week. You even had a few license plates.
Yeah, I know.
It's unbelievable because you were in Dallas. That's why.
No, the one was from my kid's school.
No. Yeah, I'm going to post that one too. All right. Good stuff. We will be back in a couple of weeks. Please shoot us an email, info@215podcast.com. If you got something to say, until then, remember,
flexibility is the key to air power.
Go buy a hat.
Respect.
See you guys. The statements made in this show are our own opinions and do not reflect, nor were they under any direction from any of our employers.